Hello, welcome to the Radical Imagination Project. I'm here with Peter Morton. Hi, Peter.
Hi, Bob. How are you?
I'm good. The subject matter we're going to speak about now is procurement and the science of exploitation, which should be a highly topical subject, particularly at this present time. The word procurement can be traced back to the 14th century, the act of processing or procuring, especially the obtaining of military supplies by a government. But in today's context, procurement also relates to purchasing process that controls quantity, quality, sourcing, and timing to ensure the best possible cost of ownership. So procurement's also about preparedness for further possibilities, like thinking ahead. For instance, if we were supposedly prepared for a no-deal Brexit, why aren't we seeing the results of all the pre-Brexit preparation in the situation we find ourselves in now? Because basically the government were totally unprepared for Brexit. As the proof is shown now amid this epidemic, especially with regard to basic personal protective equipment for our frontline staff, why are we so unprepared for anything regarding public infrastructure? Or under the present legislation, given our history, should it be a surprise? So what we want to talk about here is the danger of stopping doing things for ourselves and outsourcing to other countries, importing, exporting. We've lost touch not only with our agency, but also with our ability to innovate. So today we will be talking to our in-house engineer, Peter Morton, who's plenty to share with us on the subject of procurement and the science of exploitation. So Peter, maybe if you introduce yourself first and say a bit about your experience to speak of these ideas.
Well, yeah, hi there. My name is Peter Morton, and since the 1980s, I was employed through the electronics industry, which, as we can understand, over the last 40 years has evolved to become one of the widest reaching multinational processes that we use to satisfy the needs of our modern life. Now, the reason for saying procurement is the science of exploitation is that the procurement department have a singular task, and that's to maximise the return on investors' capital. And the way that they do that is by the measurement of not only an individual in their actions, but also the measurement of the cost of ownership, of the process, of the components, of the shipping process. So, in effect, if you've got a large volume manufacturing process for anything from beans to medical equipment, it's all applied with the same rules. The minimisation of input and the maximisation of profit. Now, how do we understand that, and what does it mean to us? Well, if we look at a farmer analogy, if a farmer decides not to farm his crops or not to tend to his cattle and just rely on the neighbouring farms, then the problem there lies is as soon as there is a disastrous event, that farmer has no visibility until the next farm over is the one that is taken out by that disastrous event. Now, just now we're talking about disease, but before we were talking about bank crashes, we were talking about corrupt governments, exploitation of ordinary individuals. Now, one of the insidious parts of the procurement process is they don't care which country that things are bought from, made in, or sold to. That's not their remit. And the real problem here is when you end up with a component from France, a component from Hungary, a component from Turkey, all being shipped into China, with components being shipped all over China into a specific place. There's absolutely no control over any of that supply chain. And especially at a point like this, where items become critically needed to save lives, and profit shouldn't have any input into that. It goes deeper, because obviously when we employ someone, we're not just paying them a wage, we're supporting their family, we're supporting their local shop, we're supporting the local community with the taxes, etc. But a procurement engineer or any member of the procurement department, whether it be an accountant, an engineer, or any other, will only look at how much it costs them in that country at that time for that particular part to be made by that person. And whilst the world runs as corruptly as it has on the backs of ordinary people, then this is the exploitation, because it's quite easy to look at saving 2 pence per million assemblies to transfer it to another country, because 2 pence times a million assemblies, it starts to make a difference to the bottom line. But none of the collateral damage has been taken into consideration when they look at how these processes are set up or distributed around the world. The real problem with that comes as soon as you start talking in a situation like this, where you have medications that are even basic materials like the face masks that we can't make in this country because we don't have the plastics, we don't have the materials, and we don't have the manufacturing capabilities, because we've closed down all the factories. We've been there, we've seen that, we've done it. Even some of the farmland has been tended to lie fallow and take European compensation, so that they're not flooding the market, so that they can protect the price. Because remember, that's what a procurement engineer does. He protects the price.
Is that a bit like, remember the butter? Remember the butter mountains and stuff like that? In the European Union, Thatcher, you know, and they were just destroying the butter rather than giving it to people because they were over the other extreme, you know, they had too much of it.
Or if you look at what Saudi Arabia is doing just now, they're producing more oil than they ever have, because what they're trying to do is drive the oil price down, because they're having an argument with Putin. While they two countries have an argument, while Russia and Saudi Arabia have an argument, the world is falling down about them. But again, the only people that they're listening to is the procurement engineers, who are telling them that if they drive the competition out of the market, then when things start recovering, they can be the only player in the market. And this is what procurement's all about. It's about protecting that profit and doing it in whatever way manages to achieve that goal. You know, whether that causes the collapse of a town, which we've seen when we've seen the steel mills go, and we're not even talking about the shipyards. But we also seen that when we looked at places like the largest European computer manufacturing site, and we see that it's now just an abandoned ruin.
So all that kind of engineering infrastructure and all the ideas and different, we're incapable of producing any of these things if they have to do it for themselves, because the whole thing is about the bottom line. And they didn't suspect we were going to have this kind of chaos, you know, this world chaos, when it really starts to matter where your engineering is and where you're getting it from.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at even just now, right? We've spoke about the simplicity of making proper surgical 3 micrometer particle size face masks, because systems are so showing up by negotiations with procurement departments. Then unless it has a particular rubber stamp on it, it can't be used. That's okay in an ideal and perfect world, where again, profit is a good thing because it increases your gross domestic product.
Mm.
But in a situation like this, that shows you the shortfalls of it, right?
Sorry, you mentioned other things like policing, education and things. How does it affect these? I mean, they're not manufacturing things, but they're obviously...
So even the police will have a business development unit who's responsible for managing the accounts. And within that business development unit, there will be a set of procurement personnel. Now, what you need to remember is the police still need to buy uniforms, they still need to buy whistles, they need tyres for their cars, they need fuel, so they need people to negotiate these contracts. Now, the real problem here is the way that these contracts are negotiated. Because that's a public body, they don't have the teeth that a private body has. A private company can go and negotiate a contract and say, well, if you don't give us the price we want, we'll go to another country. How can the police do that? But then it gets more insidious because the police are now having to juggle funds to match these bigger prices that are being driven up by the procurement departments of all the suppliers. Then what tends to happen is they need to make savings. So the person behind the desk is no longer a member of the police force. The person that cleans the building isn't employed by Police Scotland. They're a subcontractor. So you're now getting to the understanding where part of the outsourcing and offshoring comes from the activity of the procurement personnel, the engineers and the accountants who sit down and say, well, I can shave 5 pence off of that. And again, what tends to happen is, as soon as you start looking at healthcare or education, you find these very same things, that the maintenance of the building is outsourced to another company. That other company is owned by a foreign entity. Where is the return on the investment to the community? Because if the community pays for a service, the tax that's on that service should be going back into that community. But if we pay a service to a company in Devon or Italy or China, then it's Devon, Italy or China that gets that tax revenue. Mm-hmm. There's also the idea that the quality gets driven down, because at the end of the day, as soon as you start putting procurement personnel there whose singular function is to maximise the return on the investment, then that becomes the critical goal, to save the money, not to ensure that the kids have a pencil that doesn't break, or that there's chalk for the teacher, or how are prisoners fed inside the prison these days? How are prisoners fed inside the police station? How are the police themselves fed? And what you start to look at is, you see the building is now no longer owned by the police organisation, it's leased. So they've outsourced their building. You then look at the catering or the IT infrastructure, it's all outsourced. And every time you ask somebody else to do something for you, that incurs a penalty of cost. And the more cost that you're paying in these penalties, the less cost it's actually getting you the service. So when you look at this all in, and you start to look at what we grow in our farms, how little we actually manufacture here, we don't have the infrastructure to get the raw materials so that we could manufacture things. So no matter what it is that we want to manufacture, we still have to buy things in, because all of that infrastructure has been eaten away by the procurement departments of the various corporations, the IBMs, the Hewlett-Packards.
And then the issue of intellectual property. When one country control the data or whatever, internet's in manufacturing.
That has become blatantly obvious when we now start looking at the technology that's involved in, let's say, the complex respirators, right? The devices that are keeping people alive, the ventilators, right? So again, inside there's a bit of software. The software is so simple. All it's doing is just managing a small set of pulses and then reading them back. So there's nothing that would be unique to any person's idea. But here we have corporations allowed to slap an intellectual property label on it and say that we own this technology, and if you want to survive, if you want to buy one of these, you need to buy it off us, because you're not going to survive unless you buy one of these. But as we've spoke about, in my career, in the 1980s, there was a lot of design development, prototyping. So I was given the gift of disdain for what's already there. I was given the gift of understanding that things don't need to exist before you create them. So I invented a lot of things. And again, when you look at the things that are going on just now, you know, using everyday materials to make sub 5 nanometer breathing masks, or to make absolutely controllable ventilators that are discardable. They're so cheap that you could throw them away after every use. So the real problem, intellectual property, prohibits you from doing these kind of things, because the government see nice big rubber stamp, and that rubber stamp tells them that that's their guarantee of quality. But wait a minute, there's something else when you're a public body. It's not just about absolute quality. You need to have the right price and the right quantity. So if they can give you absolute quality, but they can only give you 5 at a time, and you need 3,000, 5 at a time is no good to you. So you need to be in ownership of that process, so that you can then say, well, okay, let's up the order to that supplier that gives us the component parts to make this. Whereas right now, what we have to do is we have to beg and plead and bribe these corrupt businesses to do the right thing. Especially when you see most people are giving up their time for no money at all.
Yeah, I suppose that, like, the whole system, I mean, it's a time now where we have to start thinking about how you get back on the rails, about particularly this intellectual property, drugs and things like that. So you can't treat people unless you pay manufacturer lots of money for a pill. I mean, they charge so much money for drugs, and they say it's, you know, we have to develop the drugs, but some of these drugs haven't been developed for 10 years. They haven't done any research for 10 years, but they're still charging the same money, you know, as if they need 10 years of research on the drug. It's just old research that they're still charging these fantastic sums.
Well, look at insulin. You can't survive more than a couple of days without insulin if you're insulin dependent. Insulin's a drug that's more than 50 years old, and yet the prices have consistently gone up over the last 20 years. Over the last 20 years, I've had my insulin changed 3 times due to fiscal decisions by the NHS. Now, that's due to the drug companies manipulating the market by changing where they make a drug, or they'll change the packaging, and then they'll say, but we had development costs for that new packaging. Who asked for the new packaging? So why should that cost be passed on?
But so how do we get back on track here? How do we start looking? I mean, obviously we can't wait for the government to start thinking about it. You know, they'll drag their heels. But we appear to have solved a lot of the problems. There's a lot of great ideas out there in the community and different ideas, but how do we create the sort of collaboration that we can get back on track a wee bit, start being a wee bit more independent? And earlier on we were talking about mutual aid, you know, this side, because it looks now when people are left to their own devices, they start helping each other. That's what people do, particularly under these kind of crises, and that's naturally what we'll do. But we've been trained so much by the television and stuff to look after number one, and what you get is how much money, you know, your only way of surviving is surviving in this market economy. But surely it's now time we need to get back to some other kind of value economy. And you've already mentioned ideas about how we could do that in terms of building, you know, ideas about people building prototypes for the ventilators and different things like that. So what are you thinking about there? I know we've spoken about it hundreds of times, but if you can think of any of these ideas again that we could use, even in a community sense, to try and get people to engage again.
Well, see if I could just touch on that thing about the ventilator. Right now, a ventilator, whilst in a normal world, a normal, perfect, ideal world, it's a highly scientific piece of equipment. When you cut it down to its basic function, it's mouth-to-mouth resuscitation for another human being. So that process is just providing a small, low-pressure gust of air and allowing that air a return path. So it's very simple. I mean, it's not exactly going to last you 10 years when you make them so simple. The idea being, you use as few components as possible. There's minimal possibilities of failure. You minimise the opportunity for failure to occur. We've got 3D printers all over the place. We've got lots of engineering skills all over the place. I mean, even in that call earlier, an engineer, a physicist, and a biologist all talking about politics. Well, that is appropriate, because we need to understand how we deal with the situation and how we go forward. But there's also that opportunity of that same enlightenment to then come up with these processes, whether it be the N95 respirator masks, that we can actually make a better version of it using.
I mean, it's that thing like the internet. There's loads and loads of stuff on the internet about people building things and using things. And it's interesting, the person was talking about the mainline news. What is the mainline news? Like, you can go on the internet and there's some sites that are getting millions and millions of hits, whereas some newspapers don't get a fraction of the hits. So you begin to think, what is the mainline news? What is the important news? And it's actually on the internet. And that's where you find all this innovation. And that's where you find people speaking about these things. I mean, there's a lot of other rubbish written about it. But that's where the stuff is. You get nothing off the news. The news, it's not like 30 years ago when they maybe report some of this kind of stuff about innovation and what people are doing. There's just nothing on the news about that stuff. Everything's on the internet and on these podcasts and different things like that. And people need to start understanding this is the mainline news. This is the news you should be concerned about, not the stuff that's a pipeline to Boris Johnson or the BBC, perpetually lying and just lying and lying. And there's a lot of people saying, "Oh, I don't like the internet, I like this," but they need to make the effort, but actually learn how to use the internet so they can find this knowledge that they need to start doing all this innovation stuff again. So the internet's an important part of it.
Yeah, well, again, when you look at the information even that we're getting, right, and the mainstream media will tell you they're giving us daily death updates, right? Now, it's quite a morbid subject, but it's something that we need to be pragmatic about. We need to ask these difficult questions. And the difficult question that I would ask is, why do you only count people that die in hospital when we know that there's at least double that amount? So again, not only do you have mainstream media, or so-called mainstream media, extolling their own virtues of saying that they're the real news and everything else is fake news, but here you have them actually not taking the government to task by asking them, why are you only counting people that die in hospital? Why are you not counting the people that die in nursing homes? Why are you not counting the people that die at home? Why are you not counting the people that die in an ambulance outside the building? And again, this is back to this idea that bad news affects industry, which will affect the price of goods, which will affect the price on the stock market. So all these wee procurement engineers will have lots more work to do to go and try and recover some of that profit that they've lost. So the media have got a big thing to play in the way that we all see how we get our tomatoes, how we get a tin of beans. Where do they come from? Where does the metal for the tin come from? Where does the paper for the label or the ink? We're such a fragmented species because we can't do anything for ourselves anymore. I mean, Britain, you don't want any country to be kind of isolationist and xenophobic and say we'll do everything for ourselves. But in a situation like this, you need to be able to do things for yourself. Maybe not everything, but the majority. But this idea, the whole nonsense about saving money and Brexit and closing the borders, and we see what negative effect it's had on us right now. Because even Europe itself, Britain was a driving force in that. So we were almost a conscience for the European Council. And the minute Britain comes out of that, it's like you're letting the procurement engineer go. You've taken away the human resources person that says, wait a minute, you need to think about that person's job and their family. And now these guys just get to go and say and do and carry on regardless.
The idea about the rivers are cleaning up, the cars are being off, people can breathe easier, the sky's bluer. A month ago we were worried about, well, we should still be worried about climate change and stuff. But it's interesting because at the end of the day, we never know what's going to happen. And although this is a really bad thing, look at the effect it's had on the environment. I mean,
nature's recovering. Nature has never experienced this since we evolved.
Done the world of good for the environment. It's the humans that are the problem. The animals, talking about whales coming into the mountains and going places they never used to go before. They're learning to wander again. And we are all holed up in our houses. So it's a big wake-up call as well that would allow us to start rethinking about what our capabilities are again, and how we can, people would maybe laugh about somebody having an allotment, but they're not laughing now because it can be self-sustainable and they've got the need. It's just down the... And people have dismissed that for a long time and they're going to have to get back into it. We're not talking about going back in the past, but you're talking about using the technology and the stuff we've got just now to keep that human aspect of how we live going. And it's an excellent opportunity to do that right now with these things you're speaking about. And as I say, the internet's full of brilliant ideas. What we need is a collaboration of people saying, okay, let's get together. And I'm sure people are doing that right now. We just don't know about them because the media are never going to tell you about them. You're going to have to search it, but you'll eventually find people doing lots of brilliant things that if we knew about it, it would really lift spirits and people could see, an end to this thing rather than just a kind of morbid, oh my God, the world's, you know what I mean? It could be, at the end of the day, it could be a real plus for us, not in a morbid sense, but just in wakening us up.
Yeah, another step in the evolution of society into maybe something that's more conducive to an empathic family life, rather than this idea that it's just war. It's a price war. It's a war against the virus. It's a war against poverty. No, wait a minute. Let's all, take a moment to breathe. And, again, the idea that the government have bailed out all these businesses, we now own them all. So we should be able to sit back, take a breath and say, let's see what work needs to be done. Not what jobs need to be filled. What work needs to be done. Because it's not about filling jobs. And
it's interesting about education as well, like people package the kids off to school when they're 5. And, the idea about Sweden and places like that, they don't send the kids to school till they're about 8. So a lot of kids that will be starting school this year or whatever, they can't go to school. But at the same time, there's no reason why their education, like the Swedish model, where they're learning things of their family and their basic surroundings rather than just being put into school to start this whole process to make new consumers sort of thing. So in lots of ways it might do kids a bit of good, being surrounded by their family for a wee bit longer. although it's kind of tough if you've got lots of families and they're driving you around the bend because they're not used. You know, everybody's fell out of their routine, but maybe this is the routines we have to start relearning again about. You should be running away with your kids. You know, you should be having them run about you as much as possible.
Yep. The whole idea of actually understanding who each other are, not just passing ships in the evening. Because obviously parents are out at work all day, kids are at school. They pass in the evening for a couple of hours. So now they'll actually get a chance to get to know each other. And as you pointed out, yeah, there may be a bit of friction, but at the end of the day, you know, a family unit is not something that functions smoothly 100% of the time. This is what drives evolution, these changes, these questioning, whether it be within the family unit or beyond the family to the extended family. One of the real problems is, but because we are so tied up in family, there's no outlet for emotion, there's no outlet for frustration. And that's what this kind of thing is good for, right? The idea that you can use the internet to see another human being and exchange these emotions.
If you're kind of locked up with each other, that's not exactly healthy either. Because we're social animals and we have to get out and about. And so,
but we need to demonstrate emotions, Bob. We need to have an outlet for our own emotion, because if we don't smile, if we don't cry, we don't get angry, we don't have any emotion, then all of that kind of turns on the psyche, and your mental health really, really suffers. But just seeing somebody talking, having a laugh, a joke, whatever, you know, and as we were talking, you know, letting the grandkids see the dogs or whatever, that way that there's still these kind of...
It's been difficult for kids just now, you know, grannies and kids. The kids don't understand why they can't hug their granny and stuff, and you know, so there's a whole process there. But
there's also the fact when they're kids, 3 months of their life is a major fraction of their life. But 3 months to us, once you're post 50, 3 months is a blink of an eye. 10 years is a blink of an eye. Right, but to their wee world lives right now. They don't know about yesterday, they don't know about tomorrow. So what they really need to do is see some idea of what they used to have. And that is, you know, seeing the grandparents, seeing the aunties, the uncles.
And the whole education thing, most of your education comes through people you know, your parents, your uncles and aunties. When you think about it, that's really where you kind of learn the things for life, as it were, rather than...
Well, you learn social etiquette and language for your family. And remember, a lot of human language is not vocal. It's not verbal. It's non-verbal communication. So it's the smiles, it's the tilt of the head, it's the shrug of the shoulders, it's the frustration or the frown. But these are all ways that we express ourselves. And whilst we're caught in a small space with the same people, we can't keep expressing the same emotions to the same people, because that in itself becomes a frustration. Mm-hmm. So that's why things like this are just such a perfect outlet for a crisis like this.
Yes.
But again, even this touches on the intellectual property, right? Because this is a paid-for programme.
Mm. It's quite good you can show off your art in the background as well.
Yes. Well, most important of all, universal basic income and the human rights. And then, since we went along to Document 2017 and gave some talks and information, I mean, the whole point is you don't need to have a radical imagination to actually find a solution, because it's all been educated out by the state, because it's all about learn that fact, learn that figure. These two go together, and that's what makes you educated. Not here's some information on alkanes or alkenes, or here's some information on a particular grade of metal, particular crystal structure, and allow ideas to formulate out of it. Do you understand? You know, you're never.
Look at that kind of thing as knowledge isn't intelligence. Intelligence comes through reshaping knowledge into kind of intelligent ideas. You know,
Yes.
but a lot of people
Yes.
have a lot of knowledge, but they don't particularly have a lot of intelligence. It's no.
Well, see, this is it. You know, the idea. Okay, if you can quote me the speed of light, or you can quote me pi to 75 or 120 digits, then that's great. That's knowledge. But where's the wisdom? Where's the intelligence in that? The wisdom and the intelligence would be how you work out the radius of a sphere or whatever, using these particular things. That's the knowledge. That's the wisdom.
I mean, that's another program or another. You know, it'd be quite good to go into these things. You know, you're talking about the universal basic income, and it's interesting. You know, if these things would have happened, it might have solved quite a lot of the problems just now. And it's the kind of thing, even if it happened just now, it actually still be a really good idea. And I think if we do, I think we should kind of wrap this one up just now. But I mean, if people are interested in any of this stuff, quite happy to talk to them about it or think about some ideas. But I think the next one could be about that idea about how do we put these things into action, you know, these collaborations about how people understand what's happening in the news and how to use the internet or how to use, you know, like podcasting and, you know, the social energy idea.
Collective.
Aye, you know, even something like that, because the general idea is people need to learn about things, kids, so this kind of stuff, but you need an idea to wrap it around. And everybody's interested in their city and how the city develops, especially in times like now. It's important how we start putting that infrastructure in instead of just putting shopping malls and more shopping malls. So it might be a good time to engage with that kind of idea about re-innovating people's ideas about what they want to see in the community, but ideas about how they can make it happen rather than just, this is what I want. You know, how we can engage and be part of the process, part of the dialogue.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Okay, this has been the Radical Imagination Project.
Pragmatism, collaboration and cooperation is the only way that we'll survive this crisis.
And
He agrees.
Okay.
Take care.
Catch you later.
Catch you later. Hiya. Hello you. Hello you.